When working in an environment when your primary focus is on teaching, it's important to find ways that are both reasonable and realistic to conduct research and then to publish that work. So here's how I made peace within my area of emerging technology. Needing to make lemonade, I found that action research allowed me to study my own classes once they were finished, and online environments give you a lot of rich ways to do that, and I had a lot of areas where I could look to improve my own teaching. I also found that by doing the time involved in researching and publishing about future studies, I was able to create publications that could be served through the Empire State College Library, thereby reducing the cost for my students and providing them with open education resources. I've also been able to make a number of friends abroad through my efforts and work, and that's also allowed me to improve work with my own colleagues. Using Open SUNY is a very good way to share work, and they're looking for information about teaching with technology in all content areas. Also, I co-published with my students. It does require that I do a lot of scaffolding, but it opens the doors for them and gives me new insights into the way students approach our courses and approach learning. In my most recent action research publication, mindful that I use the data after the students have finished the course and they've been graded, I was looking at focusing questions as to how the environment could support the learning that I wanted specifically here. The course itself had a number of objectives, but the challenge that I was looking at, the particular objectives, were how do we prepare students for a licensure test, high stakes, that is going to be happening by an external reviewer some half year to even 2 years after they take their content course. Students are also challenged to teach with a method called inquiry within science that they've seldom experienced when they were students and that they don't see frequently enough in the K-12 environment. So my challenge was, how do I get them ready for this environment that will assess them long after the course itself has ended? In designing this knowledge building component into the course, I looked to the interactions that would be happening within the online environment. And the way I constructed this environment, we have a combination of classic discussion boards, we have virtual reality synchronous meetings, and I also have the students create videos of their own work, which they submit. They've created them asynchronously. As I was looking at the data as the course itself emerged, I found that I wasn't seeing the kind of learning that the students needed, and so I intervened with a webinar where I could kind of overcome some of the misconceptions I was seeing were emerging. When I went to explain this environment for the journal itself, though, I had to put in illustrations that could help people conceive of what a virtual reality environment was. So the illustrations were quite helpful, and here is my showing how I did an initial briefing of the class. The interesting component was the breakout groups. We all know how to do webinars where we lead the discussion, but the students broke into their own groups and discussed the challenge question for that particular lesson, and I periodically visited the students to see where they were going with their own questions and to prompt them to go a little bit further. In this course, I also used student-created videos. They would use a screen capture program, turn the camera on themselves, and show and discuss different aspects of the assignment for that week. It allowed students to get to know each other, for me to know the students better, and really helped to create a community perspective. The particular pictures here are from a previous course, and you can see that I maintained the confidentiality of the students' identities. Publications, though, require that you do the traditional presentation of information, and so here's a screen capture where I went over the initial demographics of the students in the population studied. This screen capture from the publication shows how I took the grounded theory methodology and then, with constant comparison, went to the different transcriptions that I had of the videos and the meetings and the discussion board text that I had and started to look for trends and patterns. So you see some of these reported here. I've reported them quantitatively in this particular chart and qualitatively throughout the paper as well. Consolidating my findings, you can see that in the paper I also published conclusions and areas for further study. And my concern is ultimately the real proof as to whether this is working effectively doesn't happen until sometime long after the course has actually been completed. You can also publish traditional studies of best practice or future vision in your content area, and then you can use a link to the library resources. That way your students are ensured that they get high quality resources, and you can also be sure that you are using open education-like resources for the students as well. Finding colleagues and collaborators internationally can be helpful as well. Often you can work at a distance or through virtual environments, as I recently did with this virtual world, which was co-authored along with another Empire State College faculty member. And I've also had a long-standing work that I do with Moscow State University, where I present to them periodically about the latest research that can then be applied to language learning. And Empire State College gives plentiful opportunities for working with colleagues and presenting, and a lot of those are even at a distance, so you can do them virtually. Open SUNY likes to hear from faculty and instructional designers about ways that technologies are being used to promote content, and that is in all content areas. And I have to admit that I do like gaining the badges that they give you if you participate in their different events. You can also include students within some of your research-based publications. This student brought in a very important aspect of transformative learning, as it actually affects the adult learner environment, which is consistent with most of our students' experiences. And I've found ways to bring students into local conferences and even virtual conferences, so I can be mindful of giving them exposure to conference presentations, but I can be careful with their budget. And presently I'm working with one of our recent alums who's very interested in how do we scaffold learners into 3D virtual reality environments, and she's considering future doctoral work in this area, so it's win-win for both of us. So I've been able to find that working within a teaching environment has really allowed me to look at my own courses and improve them, and it's allowed me to find ways to make materials that I can share with my students through open education resources. I'm also better able to advise students around the challenges of publishing when you really don't have adequate time. I've been able to work at a distance from some very interesting colleagues from other countries, and it's also given me an opportunity to work with colleagues at Empire State College and even within SUNY. And you will find that the Open SUNY gives you a lot of opportunities to start branching out with other people in the SUNY network, and by finding ways to bring students into the publication process, you're able to provide more opportunities there and look at your own publications through a different lens. So whenever you're given homegrown lemons, I think you can make the best juice.